A vault of royal documents that had been left untouched for decades held the potential to shatter everything the monarchy had built. No one outside the royal staff knew of their existence. The contents had been carefully guarded, sealed with the weight of history, and for good reason. What lay within those pages had the power to rewrite the legacy of the royal family itself. But now, it was on the verge of coming to light. For years, the royal family had been living with an unspoken tension, especially between Queen Camilla and the memory of Diana, Princess of Wales. A rivalry that had started in the shadows of the past now loomed like a storm cloud over the present. Camilla had longed to be accepted, to step out from the shadow of Diana's tragic death. But there were those who remembered, who could never forget, and among them was Diana's legacy, an unwavering, unyielding force. Diana had been the people's princess, adored for her warmth and vulnerability, her connection to the public that Camilla could never quite match. The relationship between the two women was a bitter one, each aware of the other's place in the tapestry of royal history. The whispers began quietly at first. A rumor here and there was a lost will, one that had never seen the light of day. It was said to be locked away in a forgotten file, a document so explosive that its very existence was denied by those in the palace who feared its contents. Some believed it was a mere myth, a tale concocted to stir up old wounds. But as the whispers grew louder, so did the certainty that something was hidden, something that Diana had left behind that would change everything for Camilla and the monarchy as a whole. Then came the moment that would alter everything. A forgotten file, hidden deep within the archives, was unearthed. There, in the dust and shadow, lay the will, a final, irreversible decision made by Diana herself. The royal staff had always assumed that Diana's wishes had been fully carried out, her last words sealed away in the official documents. But this was different. This will, it turned out, had been hidden intentionally. The file had been tucked away, forgotten by all who thought the royal family had been fully revealed. The moment the file was opened, the entire royal establishment felt a collective shudder. Tension coursed through the royal staff. Who had known about this will? Who had kept it from being discovered all these years? It was no longer a question of loyalty, but one of betrayal. The discovery ignited a firestorm within the palace walls. Long-standing allegiances began to crumble. The very people who had sworn allegiance to Camilla were now questioning her and her place in the monarchy's future. Why had this document been hidden? Why had Diana's final wishes been suppressed for so long? The emotional weight of the situation was too much for some to bear. Camilla, who had spent years trying to secure her position, now found herself facing the repercussions of a past she could no longer control. The royal archives had been a place of history, but now they became the birthplace of a new royal crisis. The hidden will, its contents still unknown to the public, loomed like a ticking time bomb. The revelations it promised could either rebuild the monarchy or destroy it. As the royal family reeled from the discovery, the question that remained in everyone's mind was simple yet profound. What did Diana's will truly say? And why, after all these years, was Camilla now at the center of the storm? The discovery of Diana's will had shaken the royal family to its core, but no one felt the tremors more than Camilla. As the truth began to surface, she fought to maintain her composure, presenting a calm, measured exterior to the world. Behind closed doors, however, the cracks were beginning to show. Camilla, who had spent years clawing her way into the royal fold, now found herself trapped in the unrelenting shadow of Diana, a shadow that threatened to consume everything she had worked for. She stood before the mirror, staring at her reflection, wondering how much longer she could keep up the facade. Her initial reaction to the revelation of the will had been one of disbelief. Was this really happening? Was Diana's legacy truly powerful enough to undo everything Camilla had built? For a moment, denial seemed like her only refuge. She clung to the hope that this was a misunderstanding, that the will was either fabricated or irrelevant. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. The whispers, the rumors, the accusations, they were all real. Diana's voice, even in death, was still louder than Camilla's ever could be. As days passed, Camilla's fear transformed into a suffocating pressure. Every glance, every word from the royal staff seemed to carry the weight of judgment. Her every move was scrutinized, and her position, once so firmly entrenched, now felt precarious. She couldn't help but wonder, how long could she keep this crown? The people, the press, and even the royal family itself seemed to be waiting for her to falter, waiting for her to show signs of weakness. And with Diana's will, the foundation of the monarchy began to crack. Outwardly, Camilla maintained the perfect image of control. She gave her speeches, attended royal events, and stood at her husband's side with all the grace expected of her. But inside, it was a different story. The weight of Diana's legacy hung over her like a relentless storm cloud, and every passing day made it harder to ignore. The fear of losing everything. Her title, her position, her future gnawed at her. She couldn't escape the thought that she was losing her grip on the monarchy, that the very institution she had worked so hard to be a part of was slipping away. The emotional toll on Camilla became unbearable. Behind the closed doors of her private chambers, she broke down. Her tears, silent and heavy, fell onto the same royal carpet she had once walked so confidently. The weight of Diana's legacy crushed her in those moments, every whispered comparison, every lingering shadow of her predecessor. It wasn't just about losing her crown. It was about her very identity as queen consort, her entire existence within the palace, now called into question. Could she truly outrun Diana's legacy? Could she ever be seen as more than a mere footnote in the history of the royal family? The tensions between Camilla and Charles reached a breaking point. He, too, felt the pull of his first wife's memory, and it was impossible for him to ignore the pressure mounting around them. Charles was caught between his loyalty to Camilla, the woman who had stood by him through thick and thin, and his own grief over Diana's untimely death. The discovery of the will had opened old wounds for him, ones that never truly healed. There were moments when Charles would turn to Camilla, his face filled with silent anguish. But he didn't speak of the fear that plagued him. His silence was a reflection of the impossible position he found himself in. Camilla knew this, and it only intensified her inner turmoil. She could see the doubt in Charles's eyes, hear the unspoken words in his silence. She feared she was losing not just the monarchy, but her place in Charles's heart as well. She had built a life on the fragile foundation of royal power, but now, that foundation was crumbling beneath her. What if it wasn't enough? What if Diana's truth, once revealed, was the final blow? As the royal family struggled to come to terms with the ramifications of the will, Camilla's anxiety grew. Each day, it became harder to maintain the facade of control. The monarchy was teetering on the edge, and Camilla was caught in the middle, facing a battle she never expected to fight. Her world was falling apart, and there was no one she could turn to. The storm was coming, and no amount of royal composure could stop it. As Camilla struggles to maintain control, the royal family's darkest secrets begin to unravel. And with every passing moment, the truth becomes harder to hide. The moment the royal archives opened, the contents of Diana's will revealed a devastating truth that no one in the royal family had anticipated. This was not the will that had been made public years ago, the one everyone believed to be her final testament. This was something different, something hidden away, buried under layers of secrecy, now uncovered in its full, shocking glory. Diana's true intentions were clear, and they had the power to reshape the monarchy forever. The first blow came with a decision that shook the very foundations of royal tradition. Diana had deliberately excluded certain members of the royal family from her legacy. She had made it clear in the most unexpected of ways. Certain names were crossed out, their roles in her life and her children's lives erased, as if they never existed. For years, the royal family had lived with the assumption that Diana's children, William and Harry, would inherit not just her fortune, but the full weight of her legacy. But this was different. Diana's will had removed key figures from that equation, figures who had assumed they would inherit parts of her estate. Their roles, their places in the royal family, had been nothing more than illusions in her eyes. But the most shocking revelation was the unexpected inheritance left to Diana's children. The will detailed exactly what Diana wanted for them, and it was nothing like the royal tradition. The children would not inherit a life of ceremonial duties and public service. Diana's plan was to give them the freedom she never had, a freedom to live life on their own terms, outside the strict bounds of royal expectations. This was not a legacy steeped in duty. This was a legacy that valued love, freedom, and the ability to carve their own paths. Her children would inherit not just money, but the power to break free from the shackles of tradition. The more they read, the more the family's world seemed to crumble. Diana had left behind not just a fortune, but a vision for the future of the monarchy. A vision that went against everything the royal family had fought to preserve. She wanted her children to have a different life. A life where their voices could be heard, where they could live without the constant burden of the crown hanging over them. It was a vision that threatened the very existence of the monarchy as they knew it. But there was more. Diana's will also contained secret bequests, personal gifts to friends, to those she loved and trusted, but not to the royal establishment. She had taken the opportunity to reward those who had stood by her in the most difficult of times, those who had shared in her joys and her sorrows, those who had understood her when the royal family had turned their backs. These bequests were not monetary. They were emotional, symbolic gestures, marking the loyalty and bonds that had been formed far outside the palace walls. And then, there was the clause, the one that specifically targeted Camilla. It wasn't just an afterthought. It was a direct blow to Camilla's position, to her role as the queen consort. Diana had made her feelings clear, even in death. She knew the power that Camilla held, the strength she had gained by marrying Charles, but Diana had made it abundantly clear that Camilla would never fully inherit the title she had fought so hard for. This clause was a weapon, one that would destroy Camilla's security and cast a shadow over her reign. The royal family was rocked by the implications. What would this mean for the future of the monarchy? For William and Harry, the discovery of this will was both a gift and a curse. On one hand, they now understood the depth of their mother's love and her hopes for their future. On the other hand, they were caught between the lines of tradition and their mother's final wishes. What did this mean for them? Would they follow their mother's vision, or would they remain loyal to the monarchy that had shaped their lives? The emotional toll was immense, and it would take years for them to process the weight of their mother's final words. With the will now exposed, Camilla's worst fears are confirmed. But this is just the beginning. The royal archives hold far more than anyone could have imagined. As the storm surrounding Diana's will raged on, King Charles found himself torn between two worlds, each pulling him in opposite directions. The weight of his loyalty to Camilla, his wife, clashed violently with the unspoken promises he had made to Diana, his first love. The revelation of Diana's final wishes had thrown their relationship into turmoil. For years, Charles had tried to silence the ghosts of his past, to push away the memories of Diana that haunted him. But now, with the will exposed, those memories surged forward, relentless and undeniable. He couldn't help but wonder if his love for Diana had never truly gone away. Camilla, meanwhile, was growing more paranoid by the day. She could feel the shift in Charles. The way his gaze would wander when Diana's name was mentioned, the way his thoughts seemed far away when they were supposed to be together. She knew he was struggling, caught between his history with Diana and his future with her. But the stakes had never been higher, and Camilla's nerves began to fray. Her once unshakable confidence was slowly eroding. She had worked so hard to secure her place beside Charles, to win the title that had once been Diana's. Now, with the will's revelations, she felt as though everything was slipping through her fingers. As the pressure mounted, the tension between the royal couple became unbearable. Charles no longer knew where to turn. He saw in Camilla the woman he had chosen, the one who stood by him when others turned their backs. But Diana's legacy, Diana's voice had a power that even Camilla's quiet strength couldn't match. The conflict within him was raw and unrelenting. He loved Camilla, but could he disregard Diana's final wishes? Could he ignore the bond he had shared with her? The promise of something different? Something more? The thought of betraying Diana, even in death, gnawed at his soul. But the reality of his marriage to Camilla could not be ignored. He had made a life with her, and the monarchy depended on it. Camilla's desperation reached a boiling point. She began to use every weapon in her arsenal. Memories of their shared history, the long years they had spent together, the responsibilities they had taken on as a couple. She reminded Charles of the stability they had built, the image of the monarchy they were trying to project. But it wasn't enough. Charles's heart was torn. He couldn't silence the truth that had been buried for so long. He found himself haunted by Diana's memory, haunted by the question of what could have been. It was a cruel irony. Diana had always been the love of his life, but it was Camilla who had stood by him when the world had turned its back. As the days wore on, Charles began to break down, emotionally and mentally. In the solitude of his private moments, he would think of Diana, their early years, the hope they had shared, the promise of a future together that was never realized. Those memories clung to him like shadows, reminding him of a life that could have been his, if not for the constraints of the royal family. He wept for the life he had lost, and in those tears, he felt the strain on his relationship with Camilla. He had spent so long pretending that he could put Diana behind him, but now, he realized the truth. Diana had never truly left his heart. The fracture in the monarchy was becoming more pronounced. Charles, caught between his past with Diana and his present with Camilla, was faced with an impossible choice. The future of the royal family was at stake, and he couldn't pretend anymore. The tension in the palace was palpable, with every move, every decision, carrying the weight of this internal struggle. The monarchy, once so solid and unshakable, now seemed fragile, uncertain. The revelations of Diana's will had shaken the very foundation of their lives, and the cracks were beginning to show. As the cracks begin to show, the royal family is forced to confront the impossible. What legacy does Diana leave behind, and how will it impact the future of the monarchy? The monarchy, once a symbol of unshakable unity, now found itself on the edge of collapse. The discovery of Diana's will had ignited a firestorm, and as the royal family braced for the fallout, they began to fracture in ways no one could have predicted. With every passing day, the weight of Diana's wishes seemed to grow heavier, and the monarchy's carefully constructed facade of harmony began to crumble. Each family member reacted differently, but no one was untouched by the revelations. Princess Anne, always the quiet one, had never been one to show her emotions publicly. But in the wake of the will's exposure, a silent fury burned within her. She had always respected her late sister-in-law, but Diana's will made Anne question everything. Diana's wishes were a direct challenge to the family's traditions and Anne's place in it. Anne, the stalwart royal, was torn between duty and her own sense of what was right. She couldn't ignore the feeling that Diana's vision for her children would disrupt the very monarchy Anne had worked so tirelessly to uphold. Anne didn't speak of it, but her silence was deafening, and it became clear that the cracks in the royal family were deeper than anyone realized. Meanwhile, William, the future king, found himself quietly rebelling against everything he had been taught to believe in. He had always been the dutiful son, standing by his father's side, and preparing for the heavy mantle of the crown. But Diana's will, Diana's voice from beyond the grave, spoke to him in a way he couldn't ignore. Her wishes were not for the monarchy he was being groomed to lead. They were for something different, something freer, something that challenged the very structure he was bound to. William began to question his future within the monarchy. Could he truly follow the path set out for him, or would he be forced to carve his own way, risking everything in the process? The public, as always, watched from the sidelines, fascinated by the royal turmoil. The media had a field day, painting every royal move as a scandal. The family that had once been held up as a beacon of tradition and unity was now at the center of a national crisis. Public opinion began to shift. And the royal family, long adored, now found themselves the subject of intense scrutiny. The cracks in their public image were widening, and with every passing day, it seemed that the monarchy could no longer hide behind its carefully curated image of perfection. For Camilla, the pressure was mounting in ways she had never imagined. As the new queen consort, she had fought to earn her place at Charles's side. But now, with Diana's will laid bare for all to see, Camilla felt more isolated than ever. She could no longer rely on the protection of her husband, as Charles himself was torn between his love for her and his unresolved grief over Diana. Camilla's once unshakable confidence began to erode. Every smile she put on for the cameras was now laced with the tension of the past week's revelations. Even within her own home, Camilla felt like an outsider caught between a marriage to a man who was emotionally tied to another woman and a monarchy that was slipping out of their grasp. The whispers in the palace grew louder, and Camilla could no longer ignore them. She was alone, even in the midst of her own family. The media frenzy surrounding the royal family was relentless. It overshadowed every public appearance, every royal duty, every family gathering. The once tightly knit family, who had carefully maintained their unity, was now a subject of gossip and scandal. Every misstep, every emotional breakdown, was dissected by the tabloids. The very public image they had spent decades cultivating seemed to be slipping away in real time. The royal family was no longer seen as an indomitable force. They were human, vulnerable, and deeply divided. As the royal family falls apart, secrets begin to surface, and the fight for the throne becomes more personal than anyone ever imagined. The public had always admired Camilla for her grace under pressure, her poised demeanor, and her ability to stand beside Charles, the crown's heir. But as Diana's will unraveled in the public eye, the cracks in Camilla's carefully curated image began to show. The first sign came at a royal event, one she had attended with the air of royalty that had come to be expected of her. She had prepared herself for the cameras, the questions, and the public scrutiny. But as the spotlight found her, it was clear that something had shifted. Her smile faltered. Her eyes, usually confident and serene, glistened with unshed tears. It was the first time the public had seen her so vulnerable, so human. Her carefully constructed royal persona, the one that had earned her the title of queen consort, was slowly crumbling. When the inevitable questions came, Camilla tried to fight back with the strength she had always relied on. She defended her position as queen, outlining her dedication to the family, her role by Charles's side, and her commitment to the monarchy. But as the words left her lips, they sounded strained, almost hollow. Her voice cracked under the pressure, betraying the emotional turmoil that simmered just beneath her polished exterior. It was an uncharacteristic slip, and the world took note. The press, relentless and unforgiving, pounced on the vulnerability they had just witnessed. Headlines screamed of her emotional collapse, of her inability to fully fill the role of queen. The royal family, once a symbol of untouchable power and elegance, was suddenly being scrutinized under a harsh, unforgiving spotlight. The media's scrutiny didn't stop at Camilla's tears. It was a full-scale attack. Every inch of her life was under examination, every action dissected. The press fed on the public's fascination with her downfall, and soon, the entire world seemed to be waiting for her next misstep. There was no safe space, no place where she could hide from the relentless glare of the cameras. The royal family's carefully built image, once so unassailable, was now a fractured reflection of its former glory. As the scandal surrounding Diana's will continued to unfold, the monarchy's position seemed increasingly tenuous. Public faith in the royal family began to falter. Once revered as a symbol of tradition and stability, they now appeared weak and vulnerable, caught in the grip of a scandal that seemed to grow larger with every passing day. Charles, always by her side, tried to protect Camilla from the media's onslaught. His attempts to shield her were earnest, but his own confidence was beginning to waver. The man who had fought so hard to secure Camilla's place in the monarchy now found himself questioning everything. He could see the damage to the royal family, and his own internal conflict. His grief for Diana, and his loyalty to Camilla, was taking its toll. He had been strong for so long, but even Charles couldn't escape the emotional weight that Diana's will had placed on him. The royal family was fractured, not just by external forces, but by the personal divisions that had always simmered beneath the surface. Behind closed doors, Camilla's emotional breakdown was undeniable. Alone in the privacy of her chambers, she allowed herself to weep, her quiet sobs echoing through the silence. The weight of the past, the scrutiny of the present, and the uncertainty of the future all came crashing down on her at once. She had worked her entire life to be where she was to stand at Charles's side as his queen. But now, with Diana's true will exposed, she wondered if it had all been for nothing. What would the future hold for her? Would she ever escape the shadow of the past? With the monarchy teetering on the edge of scandal, Camilla's worst nightmare comes true. What will Diana's truth mean for the future of the royal family? The impact of Diana's will was nothing short of catastrophic for the royal family. What was meant to be a final, private document had become a devastating blow that reverberated through every palace wall. Diana's wishes had shattered the very foundation of the monarchy. Camilla, who had spent years clawing for her position, now faced the ultimate challenge. Diana's will had directly threatened her future as queen. The power structure she had longed to control was now under attack. As the weight of the will settled in, Camilla could no longer deny that her reign was fragile at best. Her hopes for a secure future seemed to slip away as the media magnified every moment of weakness, speculating on her place in the royal fold. The world watched as the once invincible queen consort crumbled under the pressure, her position now hanging in the balance. Meanwhile, William, the future king, found himself at a crossroads. Diana's final decree forced him to confront the monarchy in a new light, one that no longer aligned with his role as the heir apparent. His mother's voice had never been clearer, urging him to break free from the suffocating traditions that had defined the royal family for centuries. With a growing sense of rebellion, William stepped away from the family's shadow, embracing a destiny outside the royal institution. He understood that his path would not follow the blueprint laid out for him. The monarchy, as it had been, no longer held the same significance. His choice was bold, unsettling, and irrevocable. He was no longer just a prince. He was a man determined to forge his own future. The media, of course, seized on the collapse of the royal family. Every detail of Diana's will was dissected, every royal reaction analyzed, and every public appearance scrutinized. The tabloids reveled in the disarray, forecasting the end of Camilla's reign, the collapse of the monarchy, and the rise of a new order. Public opinion was shifting dramatically. Once adored as symbols of grace and tradition, the royal family was now seen as a relic, their image tarnished beyond repair. Yet, amid the chaos, something unexpected began to emerge. In the wake of the storm, a quiet reckoning began. Charles and Camilla, despite everything, found themselves forced to confront the ghost of Diana's legacy. The monarchy, once divided and teetering on the brink, now faced a new dawn, one that would require them to evolve, to reconcile with the past, and build something new. The future of the monarchy, and of Camilla's reign, seemed uncertain, but as the royal family picked up the pieces, a flicker of hope remained. Could they rebuild from the ashes of scandal and betrayal? Would they rise above Diana's shadow, or would the weight of her legacy forever haunt them? As the royal family faces a new dawn, the question remains, can they rise from the ashes, or will the legacy of Diana forever haunt them?